Rocketfellers number 8. It's not a weak issue, okay? Let's get that straight right from the start here, okay? It's not a weak issue. It is, however, the least strong that we've seen so far, based on my reading experience. And don't be a smartass, those two are not the same thing, okay? And I'm going to tell you why here. So this is a flashback story where we find out why the Rocketfellers, this family from the 25th century, has retreated back to the present day, our present day, to hide from Kronex and, like, the bad guys. And in the first 6 issues of this series, we got to know our characters and, like, the basics of what their situation is. But in this, the second of, I think, a 3-issue story arc, we're getting to see the larger picture. We're filling in the background a little bit. And the way this issue contributes to that is by giving us a lot of talking scenes. 2 or more characters in a room just talking about stuff. A little more conversation, a little less action, so to speak. There's nothing wrong with that from a textbook standpoint. I mean, you want to get that information to the reader. It's important information. But this issue did struggle to hold my attention a little more than your standard Rocketfellers issue would because of that lack of, I guess, sizzle or spectacle that you would normally get from a Rocketfellers issue. I did appreciate, though, that this issue allowed us to spend some time with Rosemary Rockefeller, the grandmother of the Rockefeller family who dies in the first issue of the series. I appreciated in particular the climbing scene with her and her husband Rodney. It kind of breaks up the monotony of the characters standing in a room formula as far as the talking sequences are concerned. Rosemary's presence in a flashback story carries a certain intrigue and interest with it, largely because her death scene from the first issue is maybe the most powerful singular sequence that this series has given us so far. Certainly it's one of them. Sia Oam is once again our penciler for the majority of this issue, and then our regular artist, Francis Manipool, who's also a co-author, tags in for, I think, the last 3 pages at the end. You know, if the goal in hiring Sia Oam for this book was to get somebody who could kind of capture the same vibe that Manipool usually brings and even mimic his style to an extent, mission accomplished. You know, once again with this issue, I had to go back and check when Sia Oam's art stops and when Manipool's art starts. So yeah, this story arc, this flashback story, does have interesting qualities to it, but I won't lie, I am looking forward to seeing things get back to the present day and kind of business as usual for the Rocketfellers. Ghostbusters Dead Man's Chest number 4 wraps up the miniseries, and it's been overall an improvement on the previous Ghostbusters miniseries that Dark Horse put out, in virtually every way. So yeah, in this story, a bunch of pirate ghosts attack New York City, and in this issue, the Ghostbusters, meaning the team of the Spengler family and Gary, come together and solve the problem. You know, my big critique of the previous miniseries was that the art just did not fit the Ghostbusters and their world. The art here, though, by Aviv Orr and Chris Peter is a much, much better fit. I was really pleased with the transition to this team. And David Embure, our returning author here, really seems to get the Ghostbusters in their world. He does a tremendous job of remembering to keep things fun. That's important on a Ghostbusters story. My favorite part of this issue is what Boer does with the Ray Stantz character toward the end of the issue. I really appreciated that as a longtime Ghostbusters fan. You know, I don't know if and when we're ever going to see this team of Ghostbusters, this team of characters back on the big screen again. But, you know, this book made me want to see more of them, and that's certainly not a bad thing. For me, the gold standard of Ghostbusters comic books was set by Eric Burnham, Dan Schoening, and that whole team during their run at IDW Publishing. I have a great fondness for those books. But Dead Man's Chest manages to do something that I did not think it was going to do, and that's recapture a lot of the fun that I had with those IDW Ghostbuster books. And it deserves a lot of credit for that, for my money. So needless to say, if Dark Horse wants to come back for more fun with the Ghostbusters, I'm in. Who in the DC Comics universe would you want helping you during a space heist? Like a heist where you're basically stealing something from Superman's living room. Well, our anti-heroes are faced with just such a decision in Cheetah and Cheshire Rob the Justice League #2. And they don't make the choices you might think they would make. So yeah, Cheetah and Cheshire are about to try and steal something off the Justice League watchtower in space. So in this issue, they pick two cohorts, basically, to help them. I think on some level I was expecting these ladies to pick flashy supervillain types to help them. I mean, this is the DC Comics universe, after all. Names like Riddler, Mirror Master, Captain Boomerang, etc. And while that might be kind of an oh moment for some, I get it from a writing standpoint. Because if you put, other flashy characters in there, you run the risk, I think, of pulling focus away from Cheetah and Cheshire. And if you do that, then it's not Cheetah and Cheshire rob the Justice League anymore. It's like the Injustice Gang robs the Justice League, or the Suicide Squad robs the Justice League, etc., etc. Ultimately, the two choices that they go with are fine. One of them is a name from, the dark magic side of the DC universe. And I really like the way that character is written and rendered, so there's potential for fun there. The second one, I don't immediately recognize. So either I'm drawing a blank here, or they've created a new character for this story. Either way, fair enough. We see Leanne Harper in this issue. Leanne Harper is Cheshire's teenage daughter, who was actually killed off as a small child in a story many years ago before being retconned out of existence via the New 52, and then brought back many years later after that as a teenager. If there's any teenager that has a reason to be moody and grumpy, it's Leanne Harper. It's possible that she's just here arbitrarily as Cheshire's daughter, but I kind of doubt it. I might look for her to be involved in the heist in some way, whether as a reluctant addition, or as a late in the story, she snuck aboard the spaceship kind of thing. Nicholas Scott's art continues to amaze. Has she drawn Cheetah before? I only ask because I noticed her rendering of Cheetah in this issue. I'd be curious to know about her creative process in terms of, shaping that character, or her version of that character. Because if you go too far in a certain direction, then it becomes a production of Cats. And we don't want to see cats in space, okay? No one wants to see cats in space. I'd kind of like to see cats in space. Are you sick and tired of Krypto the Superdog stories in 2025? I could kind of go either way, personally. Well, if you are looking for more Krypto, then you definitely want to check out Supergirl #5, where Krypto and some of his super animal friends save the day. So yeah, Supergirl has a bunch of super pets, not to be confused with the League of Super Pets movie that came out a few years ago. But in Supergirl #5, we get two half-issue sized stories, basically. In one of them, Streaky the Super Cat teams up with a miniaturized version of Titano the Super Ape to take on some super kitties. No, not those super kitties. If you're a parent whose kid watches Disney Plus, that's potentially a deep cut for you. But then in the other one, Krypto teams up with Candy the Super Rabbit to fight off a shark lady that is oddly well endowed. I'm not body shaming the shark, I'm just, noticing. Sophie Campbell is still our author here, but she tags in a new artistic team, and overall the presentation is very kid-friendly. This Supergirl book at large has been rather kid-friendly so far, but this issue especially. Now, the animals here can't communicate verbally the way that the animals in the Super Pets movie did. Instead, we get all their individualized internal monologues via thought balloons, which is consistent with what the series has done so far with the human characters, so that's kind of cool. Supergirl was actually at the top of my proverbial stack this week, like it was the first new issue that I checked out. I did not ever expect it to get that top spot, but here we are. So this book, you can argue, has been overachieving, which is never a bad thing for my money. You can't always solve your problems by punching them in the face. That's a lesson that's always kind of relevant in superhero stories. And it's very much relevant in Marvel's One World Under Doom number 7. So in this story, Dr. Doom has basically conquered the world. He's got Doctor Strange's powers, and much of the general public, planet-wide, approves of what he's doing. But then last issue, the Avengers discovered that Dr. Doom has a bunch of people in his home country of Latveria, contained, and he's draining their life force for himself, and the idea is that this is going to turn a lot of the public against him. But that's not necessarily the case. A lot of people are turning on Dr. Doom, but some are sticking with him. Does this kind of thing sound familiar? I'm just curious. But there's a panel in here where a woman who is on Dr. Doom's side, like a citizen, says that some people just willingly close their eyes to basic logic. Boy, is that a true statement. I'm going to calm down. We see in this issue that J. Jonah Jameson, who is famously the editor of the Daily Bugle in the Marvel Universe, gets attacked by Doombots after speaking out against Dr. Doom. As a former journalist, that definitely caught my eye. Always watch how the media is treated, folks. Always. So as we get closer to the end of One World Under Doom here, I keep wondering, what's the finish gonna be in pro wrestling terms? What's the ending of the story gonna be? How are they gonna resolve this situation with Dr. Doom? Because, we haven't solved the real world problem that Doom is an allegory for in this book. So what's the book gonna do? Either way, I'm gonna keep saying it. This is the most interesting book that Marvel is publishing right now, and I really couldn't recommend it more. Robin gets his groove back in Batman and Robin number 25. Actually, I guess it's less that he gets his groove back and more that he gets his color back. The Robin costume in this issue changes to one that's more colorful and I guess more in line with the traditional Robin costume. So yeah, that's the end of the gray Robin costume, at least for the time being. Can't say I'll miss it too much. If Damian Wayne ever graduates from the Robin identity and does his own thing, kind of like Dick Grayson did as Nightwing, maybe then he can go gray, but I don't know, it just never worked for Robin. But yeah, I haven't checked in on the Batman and Robin ongoing series in more than a year, I know that, but hey, it says right on the cover here, new story arc, and that combined with the new Robin costume prompted me to take a look. In this issue, Batman and Robin take on Tiger Shark and his forces. Meanwhile, a villain reemerges and prepares to menace Gotham City. Philip Kennedy Johnson is our author here, and he's also the author of The Incredible Hulk over at Marvel. And what was kind of interesting to me here is that the opening scene of this issue kind of has a backwoodsy feel, kind of like many of the issues of The Incredible Hulk do right now. The Penguin is in this issue, and the artistic team here renders him a lot like he looked in Batman Returns, at least for my money. That's not a good thing or a bad thing, it's just a thing. I like in this issue that Damian isn't as much of a snarky jerk as he usually is. I mean, the character's always been written that way, dating back to when Grant Morrison created him. But it's nice to see in this issue that the father-son dynamic between Bruce Wayne and Damian Wayne is very much intact. I appreciated that. You know, interestingly enough, in the new titular Batman volume that just launched this month, I guess Tim Drake is going to be Robin, while it looks like Damian Wayne is going to stay Robin in this book. You know, on the subject of characters graduating up from the mantle of Robin, Tim Drake has never really been able to do that, even though DC has tried a couple of times. You know, that's something they could always explore from an in-story perspective, whether in Batman or in Batman and Robin. Just an idea. There's still way too much Batman in Superman, the Kryptonite Spectrum #2, but the genie's kind of already out of the bottle at this point, so I mean, what can you do? You can't go back and change it. You know, the toothpaste is out of the tube, the bat's out of the cave. So in this issue, Superman is exposed to a new kind of kryptonite, which makes him grow really tall, which in and of itself isn't a problem, but then Lex Luthor throws a monkey wrench into things, and there's lots of destruction. But yeah, I'll reiterate a point that I made last time. There's nothing that Batman is doing in this story as Superman's science buddy that couldn't be done by someone like Steel or Mr. Terrific. The Justice League actually shows up in this book to combat the Superman as a giant problem. And if you wanted to put Batman in there, that's a perfectly organic place to do it. Incidentally, the Justice League members that Batman summons to deal with the Superman problem are Wonder Woman, Green Lantern John Stewart, and Atom Smasher. The latter not being a character we usually associate with those A-list Justice League characters. That's kind of cool. I've had some people complain to me about Martin Morazzo's art for this book. And, you know, I'll grant you it is a different kind of look than we're used to seeing for Superman art. But I don't know, I mean, wouldn't comic book art be kind of boring if it always looked the same? I mean, I don't know, I think that this art has a unique look and texture and feel to it. There's nothing wrong with that. Chemo is in this story. You know, I can't help but like that character. He looks like a big green Jello mold with a gas mask on. He's fun to look at. Is Kylo Ren gonna get some action? It's kind of a weird question, but it's one I was pondering after reading Star Wars Legacy of Vader #8. So it looks like this story arc is going to follow up on the Rise of Kylo Ren story, which came out like 5 or 6 years ago, and detailed how Ben Solo fell in with the Knights of Ren, who are like a dark side worshipping cult group. Well, by this point in the Star Wars timeline, Kylo Ren has left the Knights of Ren to sort of do his own thing with the First Order. And in this story, we see that the Knights of Ren have a new leader named Tava Ren, and she is apparently going to target Kylo Ren in this story. You know, about a month ago, in talking about an issue of Star Wars, I mentioned that I was hopeful that in that story, Luke Skywalker would get a girlfriend, because you don't often see that kind of thing in Star Wars stories. And now here I am hoping that Kylo Ren will get a girlfriend of sorts, even though there's nothing in this issue that necessarily suggests they're going to have that kind of relationship. You know, with these Skywalker men, they just all seem so, like, repressed, and they've got all these pent-up feelings, and, you know, maybe if we let them exercise some of those feelings and maybe get out some of that repressed energy, if you know what I'm saying, we could save ourselves a destroyed solar system every few decades. Just saying. I do like the idea of the Tava Ren character, though. I like the idea of diving further into the Knights of Ren and just their whole backstory. Like a lot of things, they were underdeveloped in the sequel trilogy. And of course, Luke Ross renders the Knights of Ren beautifully. Luke Ross pretty much renders all Star Wars things beautifully, so that's not really a surprise. There's also a scene in this issue with Snoke. Again, an underdeveloped character from the sequel trilogy, so I'd be interested to hear more from him, although I don't know if we will. You know, of course, this book is called Legacy of Vader. Do you guys remember after The Force Awakens came out, there were some weird fan theories about how Snoke was actually Darth Vader resurrected? Even though that would have made no sense with the Anakin Skywalker character arc. Fans are weird sometimes.